Kinneret. The biblical Sea of Galilee casts its magic spell. Few can resist its charms. Not even local fishermen born and bred on the shores of these legendary waters, like Yuval and Yuval Lufan from nearby Kibbutz Ginosar, whose unflagging search for ancient artifacts led them one winter's day to the now famous Galilea Boat. In 1985 and 86, a drought drastically lowered the level of the Sea of Galilee. We just knew that at last we were going to find a boat, but we didn't dream of anything so complete. Two brothers, second-generation fishermen in these bountiful waters. This time they had come up with quite a catch, an incredible harvest of history. They had no precedent to go on. Theirs was the first inland lake boat unearthed in the Mediterranean region. If this was indeed the hoped-for find, one man would know. Yuval and Moshe put the fateful question to Mendel Nun. Mendel Nun, here on what remains of the docks of ancient Susita, a Kinneret old-timer, fisherman and expert in local lore. Driven by the hope of making a discovery like this. Could this be the boat of his dreams? More experts were called in. From Caesarea came Shelley Waxman and Kurt Rave, experienced marine archaeologists who knew exactly what to look for. When we arrived, we carefully opened a small section, and what we found was a special kind of joint, mortise and tenon joints, typical of ancient ships. There and then we knew we had something old, at least as far back as the Byzantine period, if not older. This ancient construction method is what the experts were looking for. Planks were edge-joined by the mortise and tenon method and held in place with wooden tree nails. Water swelled the wood and tightened the joints. Here's a good example of this type of joint. You can see the mortise cut in the upper plank, and inside is the tenon. The wooden pegs lock the two planks, and from this angle, we see one of the wooden pins that held the whole thing together. An authentic discovery. The elation was contagious. It's hard to describe our excitement. We were literally in shock. I was overwhelmed. We were making history and rediscovering it. A landscape steeped in history. Here Christianity first took root. On this lake sailed Jesus and his disciples, and here he performed the miracles of the loaves and the fish, to the astonishment of the stunned multitudes. A Jewish community thrived in the Galilee during the Second Temple period and rose up to fight against imperial Rome. Now emerging out of the mud is a tangible relic of those turbulent times. There was something special about the whole experience. On our first day, there was a sudden torrential downpour. A minute later, it stopped, and there it was, a double rainbow cascading into the Kinneret. A perfect and complete rainbow, an incredible one. We felt it was a sign that we had been given permission to touch this find. Now the digging began in earnest, without any prior preparations. News of the ancient wreck had spread like wildfire. Swarms of souvenir hunters descended on the site, threatening to pick the wreckage clean. It was necessary to work at a furious pace, propelled by a pressing sense of urgency, a feeling of taking part in a momentous mission. Almost immediately, the dig yielded up treasures: an oil lamp, an arrowhead, and a cooking pot, all typical of the Galilee in the 1st and 2nd century of the Common Era. Would these help date the nearby boat? Before we could get any answers, another crisis loomed. The rising level of the lake threatened once again to inundate the wreck. You could literally see the water coming closer and closer to the boat. He waded into the water and begged, "Stop, stop the Kinneret." And in fact, help did arrive. The guys from the kibbutz came to help? Even the kibbutz children came. They helped fill sandbags as if war had broken out. The boat emerging from the mud was a masterpiece, 27 feet long and 7.5 feet wide, beautifully constructed. But the timbers were waterlogged, like wet cardboard. To avoid stepping on the fragile vessel, the excavators dug mud by hand from a suspended platform. And to prevent the ancient timbers from crumbling into dust, it was necessary to constantly water them down, and to work round the clock, meticulously copying, recording, numbering every single plank, every nail, every joint. For shade, and to preserve the moisture, a sheet of fabric was unfurled over the emerging wreck, whose distinctive form was another clue to its age. Today, we first construct a skeleton to which we attach the ribs. The planks are then affixed to this infrastructure. In the Kinneret boat, first the planks were joined together, and then the ribs put in place. Noted ancient ship reconstructionist Professor J. Richard Steffi, brought over especially by the American Embassy, believes this construction is further proof of the boat's antiquity. The ancient boat-building process was the reverse of ours. First, they laid the planks on the skeleton. Then they put the ribs in place. The unique excavation rapidly became a popular tourist attraction. The crowds were unbelievable. The police were even brought in to keep order. Sandwich vendors, an ice cream man. It was the biggest thing since the Masada dig. The volunteers came in droves, from Israel, from abroad. The boat had obviously fired the public's imagination. You wouldn't believe the enthusiasm, especially the local people. The Kinneret is a part of them. Their appetite for local lore is insatiable. I wish everyone in Israel had their sense of roots and the local pride that I discovered here. From our kibbutz to the excavation site is about 200 meters. The traffic between the two was non-stop. This one brought cake, someone else a shovel, and another one his tractor. No one in the kibbutz could resist the temptation to stop by for a visit, to offer advice, or even to work. Speculations about the boat's past were rampant. Who had sailed in this craft? Based on comparison of crew sizes, this is the type of boat that was used by Peter, James, and John, the disciples of Jesus, and inspired the artist 2,000 years ago to create the boat mosaic found in nearby Migdal. The boat had 4 rowers and a helmsman, just like those used by the Jewish rebels in the naval battle of Migdal against the Romans, described by Josephus Flavius. The whole lake was stained with blood and crammed with corpses, for not a man escaped. During the days that followed, a horrible stench hung over the region, and it presented an equally horrifying spectacle. The beaches were strewn with wrecks and swollen bodies. The dead numbered 6,700. The boat's timbers, remember, are fragile and waterlogged. Transporting such a delicate, unwieldy load to its new home in the Kibbutz Museum presented a real dilemma. Orna Cohen, conservationist and archaeologist, came up with a unique solution: strengthening the boat inside and out with a fiberglass straitjacket to keep it intact. Secure at last in its polyurethane casing, the Galilea Boat is set afloat, for the first time in almost 2 millennia. Small wonder that spirits ran high. 11 frenetic days had passed from the beginning of the excavations to this historic moment. On board, Orna Cohen.
And you were the first person to ride on the boat in 2,000 years. How was it?
Well, quite exciting. I enjoyed it.
How often does one have a chance to participate in history in the making? That's what Zvika, a volunteer from nearby Migdal, felt. I have a large farm to take care of, but every day after work I'd find myself drawn here to watch them work. And I'd stay 3, 4, 5 hours, from 2 p.m. till dark. Many felt that working on the excavation team was a unique privilege.
I had worked on 2 other salvage digs as a volunteer and had just completed a dig in Caesarea when the boat was found, and I was lucky enough to be able to work here.
The end of the journey, Beit Alon, a very special museum. Trembling fingers peel off the fiberglass, fearful of damage. A tank had been prepared for this treasure. Orna Cohen has initiated a treatment designed to gradually replace the water in the wood cells with durable wax. After several years' immersion in opaque fluid, the boat will emerge fit at last for display outside the tank. The time has now come to draw some conclusions. I'm no expert, but Professor Steffi kept saying that he sensed the presence of an excellent craftsman here. By the lathe marks on the wood, a great deal of careful work went into this boat. In short, a unique vessel with a cargo of history. A discovery that reveals more about boats of this period and about ancient transport on the Sea of Galilee than we have ever known before. To whom she actually belonged, we may never discover. But the mere sight, the feel of these old timbers, stirs up visions of ancient dramas. Today, the Kinneret attracts scores of visitors to its attractive recreation spots and famed archaeological sites. A natural paradise, where local fishermen daily take to their boats, plying these peaceful waters, just as did their ancestors some 2,000 years ago.